She's a renowned body language expert, a New York Times bestselling author, and a former federal law enforcement officer with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Janine Driver has spent her life teaching others how to read body language and detect deception. And today, we're going to get to some of that and a whole lot more. This is the Curiosity Blueprint, brought to you by Flying House Media. Our exploration into human connection and how we see, hear, and impact one another. And now, let's get to my conversation with Janine Driver. Janine, I cannot tell you how happy I am, how excited I am to have this conversation. I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for being on the Curiosity Blueprint and agreeing to share a little bit of your insight.
Yeah, of course. I'm thrilled to be here, Jason. I'm pumped. And hi to your listeners.
I would love to start by just hearing from you. What was it that got you into this line of work of decoding nonverbal language?
You know, this is an interesting question, and it always depends on how much time I have, but I'll try to make it as quick as possible. I want you to imagine at 16 years old, you have a part-time job, Jason, and you at home, listener, and you're going to go camping. And you're going to go camping for 2 weeks, but you want to get your check in hand. And the reason you want to get your check in hand is because the guy who owns the store you're working at, for me, this is my story. For me, it was a donut shop. Has a cocaine problem. So imagine 16 and you go to work and you see the guy that you report to is doing cocaine in his office. I mean, but you still want the job, because I lied and said I was 16 when I got the job. I was 15. So I wanted the job, right? I used to fill jelly donuts. Like I'd get in there at 5 a.m. and put the donuts in, and you push down and it filled with jelly, and then throw them in a big drawer. By the way, it's like a desk drawer full of sugar, and you throw it in there. And well, my mom, I said, hey, can I get the check? And she's like, we're going camping for 2 weeks. You're not going to be able to deposit the check. Well, I can't say, Mom, this guy's going to be raided. He's got a cocaine problem. Like, because anytime you see someone doing cocaine, at least in my world, I was a blue collar kid from Boston. I'd never seen someone do cocaine until my boss. I thought the FBI was going to come shut him down. So I decide to get up early, 5 a.m. I hop on my bike and go. It's pouring rain out. It's in the summer at the end of June. I ride 2.8 miles to Mr. Donuts. I pick up my check, Jason, and you at home. I'm full of such pride. I'm like, I did it. I'm unstoppable. And as I'm driving back, a man tries to kidnap me off my bike. It's pouring rain. It's dark outside because it's rain. It's a Saturday morning, so no one is up at 5:15, 5:20 in the morning. And first he's like, hey, kid, I'll give you a ride. Let's put your bike in the trunk of my car. And I look. And I don't know if you've ever looked at someone. I call it the gift of discernment, right? Like if you've looked at someone and you're like, I just don't trust that person near my kids, or there's something about that person. And so I was like, this is not good news. I have another 1.5 miles to drive my bike home. I can't turn around and go this way. I'm like, what do I do? So it's a gas station. He curves in. It's like one of those circle gas station, like driveways. And I'm driving this way. He pulls in this way, cuts me off, and tries to throw me in his car. I'm thinking, bike versus car, he's going to take me. I was like a Liam Neeson movie before Taken came, like he will take you, like hit a mirror, like leave evidence, I will find you. I will hunt you down. So I'm like, he's going to take me. He doesn't care if he hits me with the car. He's not going to care. But I knew I couldn't get home, Jason, and you at home, but there was a Bay Bank, it was called. I don't think they exist anymore. And I could see Bay Bank 1 block away. And I'm like, well, if I could just get to Bay Bank, even if he hits me with his car, then maybe Bay Bank will have a camera, and at least maybe there's some footage of who took me and what happened. Like they have a starting point. So I'm riding my bike. When he tried to get me, I went around his car. And as fast as I could, I'm just riding my bike. And I get he follows me, by the way, right to that bank. But I went through the bank drive-through, and by what I call the grace of God, I'm a swearing Christian, although I work on the swearing part of it. By the grace of God, when I went through the drive-through, he stopped. He didn't go into the parking lot. There was this big chain link fence. At the time, when you're in fear, things kind of act really weird. So for me, the fence seemed like it was 20 feet, but it probably was like a 12-foot fence. But someone had cut a hole in the middle of this chain link fence. And I went through that hole down a 6 or 7 foot like dirt incline into another parking lot. So I went down this path, went to the store. It was called Star Market. Went in. They have a payphone. So for the millennials watching or listening, you see them in movies. Or not millennials, Gen Z, whatever the new groups are. So I'm like a grandmother of the millennials, I say. So I called 911, and next thing you know, I'm being dropped off by a police car at my parents' house while they're still in bed sleeping. Thought I'd been kidnapped. They might have thought I was kidnapped out of the house. They wouldn't have known. So the reason I tell you that story is the reason I got away is I had some childhood trauma happen when I was 6. That trauma saved me from this guy, because childhood trauma changes how we look at human behavior as adults, even though I was 16. So that saved my life, that trauma. So it's really a gift that I had at 6. Well, that ends up, these two things at 6 and 16, I was like, oh, I do not, in my little 16-year-old brain, as I'm growing older, I'm like, why do these things aren't happening to my 2 younger sisters? You know, I want to break this. And later I found out if you are raped or molested, you are twice as likely to be raped or molested again. There's some type of energy change that happens. I didn't know that at the time, but for me, I was like, I need to break this pattern. So I went to college, English communications major, and I ended up going into law enforcement, ironically. So I didn't know that initially, but I knew I wanted to learn about human behavior and communications. So when I went to college, my major, English communications. When I get on all these TV shows, people ask me who's my publicist, but I had a minor in public relations. So I'm my own publicist. And I ended up going into federal law enforcement, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, 18 years. I learned so much from that. I took a mentor on, J.J. Newberry. He's called the Human Lie Detector Truth Wizard. And he changed my life. His work he put into workbooks at ATF changed my life. And that's the story. And what I do today, Jason, and you at home, is the way I got away from that kidnapper is what I teach people to do now in the business world. How do you get 2 steps ahead of human behavior? You know, I had it instinctually, and thanks to ATF and my mentor, one of many mentors, J.J. Newberry, another mentor, Jim Kavanaugh, Save Women and Children from Waco, Texas. My mentors along the way have helped me put words to what my discernment was. And so now I teach people in corporate America, entrepreneurs, moms and dads. We were just talking before the show began about us both being parents of kids. I teach you how to spot human behavior, because body language, Jason, and you at home, shows up to 5 seconds before thought. So that means when you're talking to someone, you have a 5-second advantage over the other person, over the person. So like if my father said, hey, Janine, not a problem. And if you're listening and not watching, and his lips disappear when he says not a problem, there's a problem. It's like, there's a problem here. Get the kids in the car. Poppy's about to lose his cool. Over. You know, as soon as we see my dad's lips disappear, myself and my 2 younger sisters are like, our kids think it's a myth that my dad is a hothead. Like they've never seen it, because we are 2 steps ahead of human behavior. We see the tells, and you at home probably already have that with people you know. You know, you can tell like it's time to go. Like it's time for us to move on out. I teach that now to personal and in the business world. And if you think about it, Jason, let me ask you a question. Is 5 seconds a good advantage?
It's a fantastic advantage. Yeah.
Yeah. What about the Olympics? You think the 5-second advantage is helpful in the Olympics?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about in the military?
I have a daughter who is a swimmer, and 5 seconds is an eternity in swimming. So 5 seconds is a very long time.
Yeah. 5-second advantage is really valuable. I'm an expert on court TV. And there was a case where a kid was doing drawings that weren't great. And they brought the parents in, and the parents came in, they had a meeting, and they're like, oh, you know, maybe you might want to consider taking your son home from school. And the parents are like, no, he can stay in school. Well, that son had brought a gun in that day, and he went and shot a bunch of people that day after the parent-teacher meeting. So not parent-teacher, the like principal, all the heads met with both parents, came in. The parents leave, and within an hour, their son, who they left in school instead of taking them, shot a bunch and killed a bunch of kids. Okay. Well, that happened. It was that I was on court TV one night. The next day I talked to the school that I'm talking to all the deans, and I asked them, I said, hey, just to let you know, the principal and the heads of the school for the shooting are being held responsible as well. My question to you is, what is your protocol if you get someone that's drawing drawings and saying they want to kill kids in the school and they have drawings of a gun and you bring in the parents? What is your protocol for your school? I was saying. And I said, without talking to one another, I want you to write down what are the first 3 steps that you do. So you see a kid in school drawing a drawing with a gun saying, I'm going to kill everybody in the drawing. You see that. Each of you right now, take out your paper and I want you to write first 3 steps that you do. No one in the meeting knew what to do. And I said, okay, step 1, body language is really interesting, but saving children's lives and teachers' lives and administrators' lives, like human beings, is probably more important. So I said, next time we meet, I'm only meeting with you if you have your 3 steps down. What are they? I can introduce you to people that can help you create those steps, but the fact that these things happen in schools and then other schools are not sitting down saying, well, what are our first 3 steps? There should have been police officer there. His locker should have been searched. That he should have left the school. He should have been escorted. Like, what are the steps? And these things happen. And what happens is we think it's never going to happen to us.
Of course. Yeah.
So whatever's happening in the world, I'm really big on how can I help with whatever, what can we learn from this? My job is my purpose is to inspire people to look at their world differently. So after people listen to us here today, Jason, if they're not inspired somehow, if they didn't learn one thing, then I didn't do my job for this podcast. One thing to look at your world differently.
One important point, I think, especially having kids in school, as you do as well, is in the moment when things like this happen and we see these things happen across the world, it's almost like for the next day or two, we're on high alert. But then pain can be forgotten and fear can be forgotten and you get back in this routine. And then I think to myself, why don't I think about this more? And even you telling that story, I'm like, Ben, there have been so many times where I have thought of my kids in a situation like that, where I was in a panic and now I'm not thinking about it anymore. It's like we just move past and it seems to happen too often.
Well, think about it, Jason. I just had that call with this client that I'm doing volunteer work with. But did I then call my 2 youngest, the elementary school, and say, hey, I would like to, as a parent, retired from law enforcement, I would like to know what are your first 3 steps when you find a student that is drawing something that says they're going to kill all the other students or it's a picture of guns. What are your first 3 steps? I would like to know. No. So here I am coaching these people. But then do I then say, hey, I would like to set up a conversation with the principal. So I'd like to know your first 3 steps. I'd like to know the company you work with. I'll give you a quick example. I know it's probably not where we thought we would head, so you can edit this out if you want. I think everything happens for a reason. I asked my 2 youngest, Charlie and Jack, do you have a protocol if there's an active shooter, which is such a crazy thing for us to be saying to our kids, 9 and 10. Do you have an active shooter protocol in the building? And my kid said, yes. I go, what is it? It's getting in a corner. So all we do is we make it so much easier. God forbid, if there was a shooter, the shooter comes in, boom, 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 kills everybody in that classroom. That's not the solution. It is the opposite of the solution. You should not go in a corner. So I've trained my kids that your job is to get out. The school is only 2 floors. Your job is to get out the window. You put your back against the wall of the school until you get all the way down to the edge of the school, and then you run like the Dickens. My house is behind the school and the next street over. I would rather my kids take the chance of getting out of the school, back. You don't just hop out the window and run like that, because then a shooter could see you. But you get out the window, you put your back against the wall, you scoot down to the edge of the building, and then you run. I'd rather take my chances with my kids' safety there than being huddled in a corner in a room, where now the active shooter's inside looking, that person's looking for their biggest bang for their buck. So I told my kids, how do you open the window? Let's figure it out. Like when they go back to school, I will go over and I'm going to show both my kids how to open this window. So whatever classroom they're in, I'll say, hello, welcome to school night. I'll say hi to the teacher. I will take my sons, Charlie and Jack, over to their room. I'm going to say, okay, how do we open this window? Because I need to teach them. Otherwise, they might not, in the moment of fight or flight, when there's, God forbid, something shooting down the hallway, they have to have already known what to do. So constantly I ask my kids, if I brought them in here right now, they would tell, if I said, God forbid there was an active shooter in a building, what's your job? They'd say, get out the window, back against the wall till you're into the end of the building and run.
Yeah. I mean, like you were alluding to, amazing that we have to have this conversation. When we were kids going to school, that was never a thought. And now it is a part of our every school season. We hear about these active shooter drills and things like that. And it's just absolutely heart-wrenching.
It is. It's sad. It's sad. It's sad. And it's sad that you're right, Jason, what you said earlier. We think about it for a couple of days and then we're like, I live in a friendly universe. I do. I attract friendly people and bad things can happen. So if anyone is ever in a situation at a hotel, in a building, at a mall, and you're told to evacuate the building, your job is to get as far away from that building as possible, not to sit and read about it in the news. So we drove off and she's like, but I want to see what happened. I go, good, Google it later. We are not sitting in a parking lot waiting to see what this is about. It's crazy. One time I was in a hotel and the hotel said something similar. There is a threat inside the building. Everyone stay in your hotel room. So I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a threat inside the building. I'm on like the 14th floor, right? So I'm like, oh, okay, what do I do? I don't have a gun. I'm like, what do I do? So you know what I did? I got out of bed. It was like 2:30, 3 in the morning. I made my bed as if it was not, no one was in there. I took my suitcase. I packed everything up. I put it in my closet. And I put over the suitcase, nice and neat in there. I put a towel over the suitcase in the closet, right? Like behind the bag that hangs for dry cleaning or whatever.
Yeah.
So I put it in there. And then, this sounds crazy, but they had big, long curtains. And I stood behind the long curtains. And I waited until they said the threat was done. And I just stood behind the curtains because my thought was if they had the key, like the master key, and they opened one door after another, again, they're after the biggest bang for their buck. If the bed doesn't look sleeped in, there's no luggage anywhere, they're going to pass my room. They want to go to the next room. So I made it look like I wasn't in the space. And I literally stood for a good maybe 35, 40 minutes till they said the threat was gone, behind the curtain, straight like this. These are the things, we want to get 2 steps ahead of human behavior. I mean, we're talking about some bad stuff now. We could do the same thing in a corporate boardroom, 2 steps of human behavior before the threat happens, before there's something I call nonverbal objections. I can already tell you the person seems interested in your product. It almost seems like they're selling themselves to why they should buy your product. But if you were 2 steps ahead of human behavior, you'll know she's never going to buy your product or he's never going to buy it. Because there was a nonverbal tell right there. So it's thinking, it's thinking smart.
Well, you had mentioned earlier, you call it the gift of discernment, right? So looking back on the terrible thing that happened to you when you were 16, when you were 6, these things that happen at schools when you have children, it's kind of like not ignoring the pains from the past to kind of help you paint what moves in the future is what it seems like to me is like this gift of discernment is listening to the cues that your brain is giving you about the world around you. Is it not?
That's great. That's a great analysis. I call them blue streaks. Like a blue streak is a bolt of lightning in the sky. And if there is, I have a pool back here. So if it was suddenly thunder and lightning out, I'm getting my kids out of the pool. If you're golfing, you're getting off the golf cart, and we do it fast. And so I call these little micro traumas, and sometimes these macro traumas we have in our life, they really are blue streaks that are helping us change the direction of our life. And I, as a Christian, happen to believe there's a quote in the Bible, Romans 8:28, which is everything's happening for my greater good. And so when these, for me, like micro traumas happen or a big trauma, I say, okay, somehow this is going to serve me. I was recently dating a fabulous man, very successful. I mean, I have 100% respect for this man, right? Other than my dad, it's the hardest working man I've ever met in my entire life. 100% respect. But personally, we don't communicate well as a team. As I'm an entrepreneur, and as much as I try to submit in my personal relationship because I don't always want to call the shots, I do expect to be respected and not talked down to not even like an employee, like like someone that doesn't matter. Like that doesn't work for me. I'm all about compromise and all that. So the reason I tell you this story is this man, I'm kind of gutted. This just ended on Friday, and
I'm sorry.
yeah, it's okay. So I didn't sleep well last night. Like, he's such a good man, and we're such a good match in the business world. Like, together, he's an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, we both are speakers, and we both want to inspire people to look at their world differently. He's done self-awareness training, but we just can't, we are not a fit. We butt heads, and it's not going to work. And the reason I tell you that story is I was saying this morning, okay, this is a blessing though. Like, this suffering I'm doing right now, and this relationship that was really so amazing in some regards, is still happening. It's a blue streak. It's still happening for some good. It has good. And I really think that, like, when bad things happen, I always say, okay, there's a great movie, if you've not seen it. It's called Finding Joe. And Finding Joe is based on the philosopher Joseph Campbell. And it will be one of these movies you'll watch and watch. And they have Tony Hawk, the skateboarder there. There's another guy, a famous surfer, and he was on an airplane when he was a little kid, like 10 or 11 or 12, and a small plane, and the plane crashed, and everyone died except for him and a 4-year-old little girl. His dad is dead next to him. It's in the mountains. There's snow everywhere. He's hiking now with this 4-year-old little girl. They're the only two people that lived. There's an avalanche. The little 4-year-old girl gets killed in the avalanche. Like, it is an unbelievable story. And he is sharing his story, how that needed to happen for him to be the kind of father he is today and the kind of human being he is. And so it really, if you don't know much about Joseph Campbell, he calls it a hero's journey. And so the very first thing, life is great and something bad happens to us. And when something bad happens to us, Joseph Campbell would call it your call for adventure. So my mother died at 66. She was a nurse for elderly homeless people. I mean, why would God take her? She's 66. She's helping people in the margins. No one wants to help. And it's so hard. And the way I reframe all traumas in my life is I say, this is my call for adventure. And I think the power of, I believe in manifesting and energy. And I know people think that's woo-woo. The power, I say your subconscious has no sense of humor. Your brain and your subconscious is looking for instructions from you. So when you say things like, my back is killing me, you're saying to your brain, okay, let me find a way to make your back kill you. So my mother raised me. She was a nurse, and she had her master's in self-esteem and education. She would say, cancel, cancel. So I say, cancel, cancel. My back is strong and healthy. Right? So the power of our energy, by the way, authenticity energy is measured at 40 times more. Some people think as much as 4,000 times more than love, because you and I love each other, and we can measure the vibration and the energy of love. It can be scientifically measured, but authenticity is 40 times stronger than love.
Wow.
So looking for those authentic moments. So for me, I'm really big on trying my best to remain in a state of gratefulness, keeping my energy in a positive way. So when bad things happen, traumas happen. Thank you, Mom. When bad things happen, and thank you, Joseph Campbell, I think, okay, this is my call for adventure. Okay, COVID happens. I'm going through a divorce. I put on 120 pounds during that time. Now it's time to get the weight out. Like, this is my call for adventure. It's like, okay, this is going to serve me somehow. I don't know how. And I think if you were to see the front of my house, I have a sign over my window that says the Happy Tree House. And then it says fun, kindness, respect, and safety. And if you ask my kids, why does safety come last? They'll say, because if safety came first, there'd be no fun. So I'm really big on reframing trauma and saying, this is serving me. This will serve future me. And I think that, going back to my story about being kidnapped and then, molested at the age of 6, I really think those things are serving me today. They're serving me. I think other people can get really traumatized to the point where their life is already destroyed, because my recommendation is reframing. How can we reframe that trauma and that pain? And not everyone can do it. I think the statistics, by the way, here's a nice statistic for you. We are born with 60% of our happiness. So it's like in my DNA, so you're only controlling really 40% of your happiness.
40%.
So if you're with somebody,
Wow.
if you're with somebody and they're just miserable, and you're buying them motivational books and you're taking them on fun vacations and you're doing really cool things, but they never can really make the happiness stick. It's like when you throw those spiders at Halloween, we get our kids, you throw them to the windows.
Yep.
You throw 10, 2 might stick, right? So two might stick. So if you have miserable people in your life and you're trying all these things to lift them up, you're throwing this at them and throwing that, two things might stick, but eventually those two even fall.
Yeah.
So by the grace of God, I think when it comes to the 60%, I'm like tapped out. Like I got all 60% of joy. And then the other 40%, listen, I'm sad right now. I'm really sad about this breakup. And I know it's for my greater good.
But that's such an interesting conversation and perspective as well. I actually just a couple of weeks ago sat down with Dr. David Rakel is his name. He is an expert in integrative medicine. And we talked a lot about this very thing of the impact that our thoughts have even on our physical body, our physical mind, all of it. Just the way we think can make us healthier or can make us sicker and can tell our body to behave certain ways. So perception, he gave this amazing stat, this amazing experiment where he said when he sits down with a patient and the patient perceives him as being kind, empathetic, and caring, there are more neutrophils that they can measure it. Their body will create more neutrophils to fight colds, to fight sickness, just because of their perception. So the mind is so much more powerful than we give it credit for. Like you say, I think a lot of people say it's woo-woo, but there is actual measurable science behind how our perception can completely change the outcome of any situation. And for me, I resonated very much with it when it comes to career and thinking when I look back at past difficult work experiences, I feel like I'm finally wise enough now to understand that I don't hate those times. There were years where perhaps I was unhappy, but I don't hate those times because I wouldn't be sitting in this chair right now without them. So it all makes sense to me when you explain it that way.
Listen, Jason, and you at home, Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. And so when you're in it, you can't see it yet. Like you can't see it, but my invitation is to trust that this will serve me, and that reframe is just a game changer for me. It's so interesting. So this breakup happened with me on Friday, and it was really, I thought that I might spend the rest of my life with this person. I was really gutted by it, and I was like, yeah, but these couple little things, it's like dying a death with a big blow, or dying a slow death with 1,000 little cuts. And I was like, it was really up until Friday, it was like 1,000 little cuts were starting to happen. Yeah. And, but I said, so I had to reframe it. Instead of that, I lost something. I'm like, I'm gaining the ability to work on self-love. How lucky am I that I get to be in a place of pain and figure out how to find that crown and put it back up here. Like, what a gift. I'm now, they say you pray to God for patience, he puts you in traffic. To work on self-love, how great would it be to work on self-love in a place of pain and suffering? Yeah. And I'm like, this is a gain. This is something really wonderful for me to work on me. And there's a great book out there by Marianne Williamson called The Woman's Worth. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go back into, Woman's Worth. I'm going to work on me. And this sounds crazy, but since Friday to today, I've lost 4 pounds. So today's Monday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I'm not starving myself. I'm not working out at the gym for 800 hours. I'm going for walks. I have a vibrating plate you can see all over TikTok where you stand there and you vibrate. Yeah. I do that for 20 minutes. I do that and I watch my body jiggle. I literally say, I'm so stressed, I got to go wiggle my body for a minute. And I'll run downstairs and throw it on for 20 minutes and take a call with my sister, one of my 2 sisters. So I'm not like breaking the bank of anything that I've already been doing. And 4 pounds have gone. And I don't believe that it's 4 pounds of stress and anxiety. I believe it's 4 pounds of me saying, I'm going to be okay. Mm-hmm. It's like, I think that when we can reframe things, we can begin to let things go. Yeah. It's so listen, I'll tell you this. My 2 sisters heard this person online, and they don't know the woman's name. I don't know the woman's name, but this is a game changer for me, and it might be a game changer for you. You tuned in to listen to Body Language and Technique Deception. You're going to hear this and be like, holy crap, I really needed to hear this, which is when things are happening in your life, do you turn them into feathers or bricks? Do you walk around with this bag of bricks, or do you walk around with feathers where they're light and they can disappear? And so that, visual for me has helped me tremendously. Like with this breakup, I'm thinking, do I want to walk around and add another brick to the bag I'm walking around with, or can I turn this moment into a feather? And it's hard. This guy is if you lived in the DMV area, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, you would know who this guy is. He's that successful, and he's that dynamic, and he impacts so many people's lives and we have the same values with raising our kids. We just cannot, it's just too much. We just can't communicate in a way. Like, I think both of our egos get threatened, and it just is unhealthy for me and for him. And can I turn that into a feather? Yeah. And so for me, stepping on the scale, what I think was this makes me emotional. What I think the 4 pounds is I'm not carrying the bricks. I'm not saying I'm going to hang on to these bricks of this incredible relationship that I had that won't last long term. It's okay. It served its purpose. I learned something from it. I'll continue to learn. I don't know what it is. Blow it into, I think that's where the 4 pounds comes off. It's not out of me not, starving myself, because that's certainly not happening.
That can be a big in of itself. But even as you say that, I actually felt my shoulders drop a little bit, just kind of visualizing that release of the bricks. And it's a wonderful way to look at it.
Oh yeah. I just talked this to corporate America last week, and these are people that get paid millions of dollars, and high level corporate people in the pharmaceutical industry. And this one group of pharmaceutical industry doesn't get along with this other group, and they're partnered together, right? They made the drug, and they have the big mothership, and they are butting heads. And they're telling me, oh, this other group is really passive aggressive with us. Like, oh, give me an example. And they give me an example. And 3 days ago, they said this in a meeting, and 5 people in the room are like, yep, they did. And I go, whoa, it feels like you guys are carrying a lot of bricks. This happened several days ago. This thing, this person wasn't prepared for the meeting. So they're saying you need to change your form in some way. But you all know that this person was not prepared for the meeting. You don't even think they're looking at the actual document you have. Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah. So why are you turning it into a brick? And then carrying it, 5 of you carrying it over to me on, 4 or 5 days later. Let's turn it. Is it possible to say this is a feather problem? And so I look at my life now, since my sister has shared this with me, I look at this as all problems are feathers. I refuse. My life's busy. I'm a single mom, 3 kids. I'm not going to carry around a bag of bricks. Are you carrying around a bag of bricks? Why? How is that serving you?
Yeah.
So you might think, let me share this with you. I'm a body language expert. Most people have me, Jason, on a podcast because they want to learn about body language tricks. Listen, I wrote a couple books. You mentioned it. You can Google body language. I'll give you whatever body language stuff you want. But here's the deal. Body language really doesn't matter at the end of the day. And it's terrible to say because that's how I make my money as a keynote speaker. But I like to say I love trees. My house is called the Happy Tree House. If I showed you my backyard, maybe I'll show you at the end. It's all trees. I'm surrounded by trees. And I love trees. And I want you to think like a tree. The roots of the tree go into the trunk of the tree, then they turn into branches, and then there's leaves. And I use this as my visual metaphor of how we communicate. And there's 4 stages of how we communicate. Step 1 are the roots of the tree. It's what we believe. What we're talking about right now are the roots of our trees. It's our belief system. It's how do we process trauma? It's how do we process opportunities? How do we reframe what we're saying? All these things, all of our beliefs. Do we have limited beliefs? And if we do have limited beliefs, how can we break those limited beliefs because they're no longer serving us? And so the roots of the tree are the foundation. So that's step 1 in communication. Step 2 is the trunk of the tree. The trunk of the tree, Jason and you at home, is body language. So what we believe happens before body language. And then the branches of the tree, that's thought. So we've got intention, what we believe, our values. Simon Sinek would call it your why. It's all the same stuff. Then comes the action. Body language, the trunk of the tree. Then the branches are thought, and the leaves are words. And if you think about words and the leaves or the fruit or the berry on the tree, when the words fall off and hit the ground, they create what? A new tree. a new root system. I have a huge oak tree in my backyard. And it's funny, I had a landscape guy come because I have a meandering path down to a pavilion. And in between these two giant bushes, I have these weed trees growing in the middle of the bush. So when he was coming to trim all my weeds, I go, get these weed trees out of here. He goes, weed trees? He goes, Janine, this is an oak tree. The leaves from this big giant tree over here that comes through the deck, the leaves must have fallen in here and it had enough nutrients and water and sunlight to grow another tree. He goes, this tree right here is 20 feet tall that you're calling a weed. It's 20 feet tall. He goes, if you went down to buy this would be easily $450. And he goes, then you have to pay to have them take it to your house and then plant it in the ground. And I'm ready to cut it down. He's like, no. And then there was another one. And he goes, you've got another one right over here. I'll send you a picture afterwards of these weeds, And I think that if you think of that words that we use, fall to the ground and create a new tree. Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting because that tree that did that, when I go outside, and the tree is huge and it comes through my deck, I touch the tree and I whisper, you're my favorite. You're my favorite. I know I sound like crazy, right? Crazy town. And maybe I am a little crazy. And so I'm like, you're my favorite. And here it sends 2 more trees that would have cost me $800 to do. I am all about manifesting. I have a sign right here. I don't know if you can see it. And it says, attracting money is easy.
Okay, see it, yeah.
And it's made of license plates from all around the United States. And so when I look at it, it's right here. I'm in my bedroom. And when I look at it, I think I've got energy coming from all different parts, from one corner of the other corner of the United States of America, sending me energy that attracting money is easy. So that's the roots of the tree. Then comes body language. This means body language happens 5 seconds before thought. So today we are not really talking about steepling or chin grabs. Not yet. Not yet. We're talking about something way more important, which is getting real strong roots. Because if I taught you steepling is power, authority, and confidence, right? So the higher the steeple, the more we intimidate people. This is steepling. Fingertips to fingertips, like prayer hands, right? We used to see on The Simpsons, Smithers, right? Trump, like steeple. Oprah Winfrey likes the steeple. If I teach you this move, but inside you feel insecure, not good enough, not lovable enough, not powerful enough, you feel intimidated, and I teach you steepling, all your other body language is going to come across as you're insecure, you don't feel good enough, you don't feel powerful enough, you're threatened. So it really comes from the inside, from this beliefs. I spoke once at Georgetown University. This was years ago. And I'm known as a body language expert, but I specialize in body language, detecting deception, emotional intelligence, and decision making connected with movement, profiling. And I spoke, and a woman said, it was a graduate program. And this woman, it was on how to do job interviews. And a woman said, Janine, at the end of the interview, I'm getting in a group interview tomorrow. 5 people are going to interview me. At the end of the interview, is there a question, if you were being interviewed, Janine, that you would ask? I go, yeah. She says, what is it? I would say, now that you've met me and the interview is coming to a close, I'm curious, what does the ideal candidate look like for this job? And I'd like to know from each of you how I measure up to that description now that you've met me. And she said, oh, I could never ask that. I would look desperate. I go, you're right. You would look desperate. I would look confident. I would look confident. Yeah. Because I authentically want to know. Yeah. Because you might say, well, Janine, we're really looking for someone with stronger writing skills. But I didn't have an opportunity to talk about it because it's not my favorite thing to do. But I'm a New York Times bestselling author. I've written 2 books. I'm working on my 3rd book right now for HarperCollins called 38 Words with Hidden Meaning That'll Change Your Life. So I am an author, but I much rather connect with human beings. So I do have that writing skill.
This is what I love about all of this. Actually, you mentioned before that, body language is just a part of all of this. And for me, everything this podcast is about connecting with others. So it's one thing to learn the tricks of the steeple. Like even when I do it for you right now, I'm like, oh, I'm not pulling this off at all. Because right now I'm wondering, is my shirt okay? And, I just know I'm not pulling it off. But to me, that's the important part, is understanding that. I think it was one of the myths you wrote in the book, is that body language can't cover up your true feelings and how you're actually feeling. These are just when you just do something with your body, it doesn't mean you're selling it. You're not really pulling that through. And I think most people are able to read other people, whether they're conscious of it or not. And so that's the part that's so interesting to me, is that human connection part, and truly understanding. You can talk about reading a room, but I am much more about reading a person, understanding if we're giving the person what they need to feel comfortable, or am I giving off an energy that's changing the environment? And that's the part of all this that I was so curious to learn from you, is like, how do we use these tips and tricks that are so fascinating, but really, how do you see human connection really unfolding? And for me, it is so much about being confident in yourself, but also being aware and empathetic to the fact of somebody else not being confident or not feeling comfortable. And so I think you bringing that up was this great moment for me, just hearing you say that, because that to me is really the crux of what I want to explore more, is how do we get the most out of others by getting the most out of ourselves?
Yeah, I think I love that, Jason. And I say a line in one of my books, if a mirror were to drop down in front of you in that last interview, negotiation, conversation with your child or a parent or a teacher or on a date, if a mirror were to drop down in front of you, would how you're appearing look the same as how you're feeling on the inside? Or would there be a disconnect? And I think that's where authenticity lies. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I get that. And, I'm a Boston girl, big personality. I talk way too much. And I think by the grace of God, I make a living out of it. I had someone recently say to me, "Who said you talk too much?" And that just hit me. Like, what a beautiful gift for that person to say that.
Great question. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I'm like, wow, yeah, that's a belief that I have created. Where did that come from? And it's, I have a friend, Frank Marsh, who works at the FBI, and he said, if someone gives you a gift and says, "Here's this watch, Jason, I bought you this watch," and you already have a watch, and you go, "No, I'm good. Thank you. I have a watch. This was given to me by my dad. It really means a lot, but thank you so much. Please return it." You don't accept that gift. But when people give us negative feedback, so often we accept it. Right, we accept that gift, and we don't even realize that we're accepting it. There's a woman out there named Andrea Quinn, and she wrote a book about the quintessentials for women to have their dreams come true. But she calls these moments when someone gives us negative feedback just good to knows. Don't accept it and say, "This is who I am." It's just a good to know. Hey, your bald head, is not working on the podcast. So the fact that you're wearing a hoodie or a sweatshirt, like, you really should be wearing a tie. Not, of course, I'm in shorts over here, so, and a tank top. But instead of us taking it personally, I think that happens more with women. It really goes back to our beliefs. It goes back to the roots. There's a great video. Here, I'm going to give homework to people, another homework assignment other than Finding Joe. There's a great video. If people go to YouTube and they watch, it's called, what's his name? Michael Jr. He's a comedian. He happens to be a Christian comedian, but he's not talking about Christianity. If you're not a Christian, that's fine. Some of my best friends are atheists and Buddhists. I think my oldest son's going to become a Buddhist. Like, if I kill an ant, like, it's crawling on me, he gets sad. I'm like, you are a Buddhist in the making. Like, this is like happening here. Whatever you believe, that's cool. Just believe it. Like, I want to know the story behind why you believe what you believe. I'm always interested in the story behind the story, right? So this Andrea Quinn calls these moments, good to know. So when something challenging happens to me, I just think to myself, now I try my best, is like, okay, those are good to know moments. Like, how am I showing up as the best version of me? What is the story that I'm telling? I'm getting really clear on who I am. And so this homework assignment that I want you to watch is Michael Jr. He sings the song Amazing Grace. And well, he doesn't. He talks to his audience in between commercials. And he's going to say to this guy, what do you do for a living? The guy's going to say, his name's Daryl. He's going to say, "I'm a singer." "No, I'm a music instructor. I'm a music instructor." "You are? Can you sing?" And he's going to go, "Yeah." And Michael Jr. says, "Great, sing a couple of verses of Amazing Grace." And he sings it. My challenge for you is two parts. One is when Daryl sings the song Amazing Grace the first time, look at the body language of Daryl and look at the body language of the people in the audience, how they're responding. Michael Jr. is then going to say to Daryl, I'm wondering if there's a second version of that song inside of you. And he's going to make up a scenario. Imagine this happened when you were a kid. You were shot as a kid. Your uncle's in jail. Is that version of Amazing Grace inside of you? And he goes, "Yes, it is." Just pain, suffering. Now he sings Amazing Grace the second time, okay? When he sings it the second time, pay attention to the body language of Daryl. How does he move his body when he sings now? How does the audience respond? Michael Jr. didn't say, hey, let's sing the song again, but when you sing it, I want you to lean sideways and take your finger when you're singing Amazing Grace. I want you to move your body. I want you to get engaged. He doesn't. All he did was change the roots. He changed the belief. He changed the why. And then the body language just naturally happened, not just with the singer, Daryl, but with the audience. They stand up, they push him, they're clapping, they give a standing ovation, they come over, they push him again. And they're so engaged. And my question to people is not only is this a great metaphor of how body language comes after what we believe, but my question is, in life, personally and professionally, are we showing up today as the first version of Amazing Grace? Or are we showing up as the second version of Amazing Grace? And believe me, I get it wrong way more than I get it right in all aspects of life. And am I today, personally and professionally, did I show up with passion? Did I show up with purpose? Did I show up as that second song? Did I make people want to get out of their feet and come and give me a hug, or to push me over because they learned something that'll inspire them to look at their world differently? Or did I show up in a way that people are like, okay, that was interesting. Simon Cowell would say in American Idol, you sang the song fine. You look fine. The song's a good song, but I got to tell you, no one's going to remember you next week. You didn't show up as that second song of Amazing Grace.
So this gives me the chills as I listen to you say this, particularly because of something we talk about all the time here. I mentioned before, so our company, Flying House, we do a lot of testimonial style videos, and 9 times out of 10, if you're sitting down across from me, it means you've lived through something pretty difficult. We work with a lot of patients who've lived with debilitating rare diseases, or people who've had traumatic moments in their life, or cancer. So if you're sitting across from me, it means you've been through something. And what I love about my team and what we do so much is the understanding of everything you just said. So oftentimes we'll see these videos online. We'll see people do it and say, I want you to give this story to me in an authentic way. I want you to be conversational. Just be comfortable. Just say it like you were telling somebody else, and they'll coach them. Here's how you do the inflection. And it always drives me nuts because but these are the same people that will push authenticity. Authenticity, it sells like such a buzzword. And for me, I would rather spend an extra hour in that chair across from you. And let's just talk about everything else. Like you and I are right now. Let's get to know each other a little bit. Let me show you that you can trust this story with me. Let me find out who you are before I find out what happened to you, and take this time. And instead of telling them how to say something or give them direction on, can you just be conversational for the audience? Instead, we forget that there's an audience at all because it's an audience of one right now. And so that to me is exactly why I wanted to talk to you about this, is that authenticity is not something you can give to somebody. It's not something you can suggest from somebody. It's something that you can inspire from somebody simply by being willing to listen and willing to, like you said, reframe or reveal a different set of roots. And next thing you know, you're singing Amazing Grace with all the heart that you have inside of you.
Yeah. Do you know, first of all, I love you so much. And it made me emotional to think that whoever gets to sit across from you has gone through something. Like, I think that the fact that you're connecting with people who have gone through suffering, I'm not emotional for my own thing. I'm emotional for all the people that you've got to connect with, because I've been around a lot of suffering, and I've been around a lot of people who are chained to their suffering, right? Like, the life is passing them by, and I'm really big on limited beliefs, and I have my own, by the way, and they get called out like that I talk too much, and I do talk a lot, but who says it's too much, right? I guess that's relative. Depends on who you are listening on the other side of my conversation. But there's this great thing, a visual that I think of quite a bit, Jason, and you at home, which is baby elephants. How they train baby elephants is they attach a rope to the baby elephant's ankle, and they attach that rope to a tiny little stick in the ground. And every day that baby elephant, as you might imagine, tries to break free. Like, he runs in this direction and pulls at it, and runs to the right and to the left and back. And for hours and hours and days, that baby elephant tries to break free, and he can't break free, even though it's a stick in the ground, there's this rope. So this baby elephant is so extraordinary. It gets bigger and bigger and stronger and stronger. And so now it's this big, beautiful, giant elephant, right? That you see the picture of on an animal cracker box, right? This big, beautiful elephant. And that same small rope, the same rope attached to that same small stick in the ground will hold that giant elephant in place. That's what I call a limited belief. A limited belief to me is something that may have once held you back, may have once been a reality for you, may have once even kept you safe in that time. But now, years later, you still are hanging on to this thing that's holding you in place, being molested at 6, being almost kidnapped at 16, having, I have a sister that almost died. I was in an abusive relationship when I was 22, a hotshot lawyer out of Connecticut beat me to almost to death. And as I'm on his driveway, barely breathing, grabbing my heart, can't breathe. I'm thinking I'm going to die. He is at his door, his garage door, and he lowers it like a movie. And as it slowly lowers, I'm on the ground dying, I think. And I see it slowly lower. And he literally screams out to me, "I hope you die out there." And as the garage door lowers, and I was like, I will be damned. I am getting up. I am strong. I got this. I'm amazing. I can get myself to my car. Like, I have these things that have happened, traumas or micro traumas, I say, these traumas that have happened in my life that very easily could have kept me chained. I could have limited beliefs about men. I love men. I'm looking for my forever person. So how do we break those chains that limited belief that once did, in fact, kept us there, but now it's no longer serving us? And so for me, thinking about authenticity, thinking about breaking out of pain and suffering is I'm not that baby elephant anymore. I'm going to take care of that baby elephant. I still want to love little Janine. I want to protect little Janine. I make hopefully smarter decisions as I meet more and more challenges that will come my way in life. But it's not about body language. It's not about me coming in. And by the way, I never say I'm going to show up as authentic today. I've always been authentic. As a matter of fact, it's also been my curse because people will say to me like, "Oh, you're a little too much." Like, I was on the Today Show and it was Movember, and they all had these like big beards, and it was a segment. I was pregnant. I was like 8 months pregnant. You can see it on YouTube. And Willie Geist, I have a secret crush on Willie Geist. I told my husband, I was married at the time, I'm now divorced, but I told my husband, I'm like, I have a secret crush on Willie Geist. My ex-husband goes, "I don't think you understand the word secret." I would tell anyone who would listen, right? So if anyone doesn't know who Willie Geist is, if you watch him anywhere, you will fall in love with this guy. I told his wife, I go, "I have a secret crush on your husband." So I think I even told Willie once. So Willie Geist has this big beard, and my vibe is I'm very fun. I'm all about fun and playful. And so I touch his beard, and it was a segment on where to sit on airplanes. Like, who gets the elbow space? What's body language etiquette on an airplane? And so we're on these Pan Am airplanes, right? I'm a BBG, big bottom girl. So I'm squished in, I'm pregnant in this like tight seat from like the 70s, and Willie's to my right. And then next to Willie is Al Roker. And so the three of us are on this segment. And I'm flirting with Willie Geist. I'm touching his beard. I'm like, "Ooh, your beard's very fancy, Willie. Look at that." And he's like, "You're very friendly, Janine. You're very friendly." I go, "You're very handsome with the beard, Willie." And I look over at Al, and Al Roker is like this. And I go, "Al, do you need some love, Al? Do you need some love?" And I reach my hand over and I try to tickle his beard. And he's like, "No, don't love me. Don't love me." And it's so funny because people said to me after that segment, "Oh, it was, a little too much, Janine, a little too much Janine on the show. Like, you're on TV. When you're on TV, you need to be a different version of you. Like, on TV, you need to be more polished. You need to have your sound bites. You need to know, like, the opposite of what you were just saying. Like, practice, pretend that I'm this person." And I go, "I can't do that. Like, I'm a terrible actress. Like, I'm really bad at acting." So I said, I cry all the time. And in my TED Talks, I cry. And I dated a guy once and he said, was that crying real? And I was like, oh, this guy's not for me. That show, the Today Show, some people gave me a hard time. Guess what happened? So many people, I guess, wrote into the show that they loved that segment and got a kick out of it, that the next day I get a call from my friend Melanie, who lives over in Maryland. I live in Northern Virginia in Alexandria. I get a call from Melanie and she goes, Janine, you're not going to believe this. I go, what? She goes, Al Roker and Willie Geist started the 9 o'clock show talking about yesterday's segment with you. They're like, and guess what? They are talking about me for 3.5 minutes. It was the same length as the segment. And they're like, how about the segment yesterday? We heard a lot about that segment yesterday with Janine Driver. And then Willie Geist is like, yeah, she owns a company called the Body Language Institute. Imagine that. There's a building somewhere, Willie, that, or Al, that it's a body language institute where they analyze body language. Yeah. And Janine Driver, she's the CEO. We love you, Janine. We love you. And Al Roker goes, she was right there stroking your beard, right there stroking your beard. Right? And yeah, we love you, Janine. That testimonial would have cost me millions of dollars in advertising. And the reason I got it was because I just showed up as me. There are going to be people in our lives, and they're in my life too, that are going to hate on us and say us we need to be more of this or less of that. My thing is, well, when's the last time you were on the Today Show? Tell me a time you were on a show and your system worked for you and helped you. Like, people are giving us unsolicited advice all the time. And is my challenge is to you and to myself is make them good to know moments. Don't allow them to create a limited belief that you can't be who you are, whatever that is.
To me, what I've noticed, the people that make those comments, like it was too much, Janine, or that personality is just too much, you need to be more like this. They're usually filtering their own fears, their own insecurities through you, because somebody who's saying your personality is too over the top right now is probably them being nervous because they're trying to predict what somebody else is going to think of the situation. They're going to get secondhand embarrassed. So that is always fascinating to me. But what I have found, and I've talked to thousands of people in my life, is that the people that are truly over the top, and I think that and it's accurate, is because that's not who they actually are, and you can tell. But when somebody has a bigger personality or a smaller personality, but it is obvious that it's who they truly are, it's very difficult to get annoyed by somebody like that or to not like them. People gravitate towards realness. And so I think that's really where it comes through, is people are constantly filtering their own insecurities through somebody else, which is just another way to hide.
Oh, yeah. Listen, you're in Chicago, and I was sharing with you, I went to Columbia College in Chicago to become a profiler before the show started. Mm-hmm. And movement connects to how we make decisions in life. There are 12 movements that all human beings make that could connect to how we make decisions. And it was so interesting for me because I am for sure dynamic, authentically dynamic. I don't just turn it on. And it doesn't mean I don't have quiet moments. I'm an extrovert introvert. So I like to read books and I do quiet stuff. But here's the deal. This is why I'm telling you this. I'll land this plane. When I went to Columbia College and took this program called Movement Pattern Analysis, MPA, we move in a pattern that can be analyzed. And it's scientific. And one of the ways to make something scientific is it can be called what's called a grounded theory. So this movement pattern analysis, it's been researched by Harvard, by Brown, by the Naval War College. It's 98% accurate. So I could look at your movements for 2 hours on a video, and it doesn't matter. You could be speaking Chinese, Jason, and I can profile you. It takes it takes a couple hours to profile you because we're looking for these 12 movements, and we just do tick marks. Oh, he did a descend, a rise, an advance. He did an increase in pressure. He did a direct. He did an indirect. We're just tick marking on one piece of paper. And then I could give you, similar to the enneagram, the difference is you're not answering questions. It's connected to who you authentically are. Now, in Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENFP. And I ride that E versus I, but I'm slightly more on the E, but I have that introversion. I'm definitely F. I'm through the F feelings, very feeling, emotional based. I cry. My mother was like this too. We cried all the time. So I get this program. They're profiling me. The teacher profiled each of the students. There were 10 of us in the class. She was Janine Driver. It took me 15, 20 minutes to profile you. Everybody else, 2 to 4 to 5 hours. It took me 15, 20 minutes. I go, really? Why? She goes, you do so many movements of the movement DNA all at once. And I'm so dynamic when I'm talking that she was able to code me really quickly. And it made me feel really good, Jason, and you at home, because it's just authentically who I am. And for you to tell me to be less of me on the Today Show, you're essentially saying, Janine, when you lean forward, don't also increase pressure. Just slowly lean forward, but don't increase pressure at the same time. Like, it's literally connected to who I am as a human being. I lead on my sides all the time, and I'm a bouncer. And so this connects to my movement DNA and how I make decisions. So people who, like, if you see people, so here's a body language tip for people. I even noticed that my shoulder's coming up in our interview here today, my left shoulder. It might be inversed when you're recording, but this is my left shoulder. And so as I'm talking, I noticed a couple of times, oh my God, I live here. So these are the scales of justice. So this is called a rise, and this is called a descend. So whichever one leans the way. So rise, descend. If you see people standing up and they always kind of go from hip to hip, and if their shoulders dip down like this, think about it. It's like someone going, I don't really know. So this is the scales of justice. These are people who are evaluators. They like a system. They prioritize. They set goals, well, not set goals. They prioritize. They prejudge situations. And so for me, one of my weaknesses is I see things in black and white and not shades of gray. And so that's a challenging one for me, because like this guy that I was dating, Dan, it's either working or it's not working. Well, maybe we could both, if we get along so well, maybe could we try a therapist together? Could we try a life coach together? Could we sit down and have a third party talk to us on how we can have tough conversations and still both get to be who we are, but be respectful when there's sure, we could do that. Like, but for me, it's like, it's this or that.
Yeah.
And it's just connected to movement DNA. Like, if you are Michelle Dresbold, the author of Sex, Lies, and Handwriting, and you're softer spoken, you're more of an introvert, like, kill it at being that. Like, just be you. Like, because someone like me is going to be pulled towards someone like you. Like, I love Michelle. And the reason I love her is that authenticity. And if you realize we are who we are and it connects to our movements, and someone else doesn't like it, that's going to be okay. Like, it's okay, because they move differently than us. Someone who leans forward and back a lot, right? So leaning forward, back. By the way, Jesse Itzler's here, Sarah Blakely. I don't know if you know them. Sarah Blakely and Victor Spence. Jesse's I love Jesse's a client of mine. So leaning forward, leaning back, they both do this a lot. So they're anticipators. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. If you watch Sarah Blakely in an interview, right? So she'll lean forward, she'll lean back a lot. So Jesse tells the story that, because I profile both of them, Jesse tells the story that one day a friend of theirs, they live in Atlanta, but they also have a house over in Connecticut. And one day Jesse says to Sarah, hey, our friend that lives next to us in the lake is going to parasail to his office on the other side of the lake today. He's going to parasail to work. Now, this guy right here that has this house near Jesse and Sarah, his parents invented the Iron Man. They invented the Iron Man. His family, his parents. And so they're like super fit, like Jesse, super fit. So Jesse goes, yeah, I don't know his name, Max. Max is parasailing to the other side of the lake for work today. Sarah says, is that safe? And he goes, what do you mean? And she goes, well, what happens if he gets hit by a helicopter? And Jesse looks at Sarah and says, Sarah, has anyone ever been killed parasailing by being hit by a helicopter? She's like, I don't know, but it could happen. He goes, well, let me ask you this. Have you ever seen a helicopter over our lake in all the years that we've owned this house here in Connecticut? Have you ever seen a helicopter over this lake? Well, no, but it could happen. So people who lean forward and back, remember we started, Jason, and you at home, and I said, I can teach you how to get 2 steps ahead of human behavior. I'm all about authenticity, and I'm all about, can you get 2 steps ahead of what this person's telling you? If you were selling to a Sarah Blakely, you're going to know her questions are going to be, what does a year look like? What does 5 years look like? What does 10 years look like? People who lean forward and back a lot. These are the people that don't run just one scenario or 2 or 3. They're running 50 scenarios in their head all day long. What if this happens? But what if this happens? They can also be a little gloom and doomy, because you could give them an idea and they might be that, yeah, but people.
Yeah.
So if you're in the meeting if I'm in a meeting and I see someone as we're talking kind of leaning forward and back, and I see this about 10 times, I know how to sell to that person because I'm going to say, you know what, Jason, I'm wondering if you might be running different scenarios about what it might look like for you to hire me as a keynote speaker for this upcoming conference that you have. Let me run through a couple of things that my clients have shared with me. Let me talk about how I share measurable learning objectives. So a day after I speak, an hour after I speak, a week, a month, how you can measure the impact hiring me as your keynote speaker will have on your audience. Would that be something that's helpful to you? And what's that person going to say? Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, how can we measure it an hour, a week, a month, a year later? Great. Here's how we do it. Here's the tool we use to have that measurable, powerful, it's motivation with education and comedy.
Well, and then I would assume not only that, but there's a feeling when somebody seems to know you that well, to know what, because you know you're not a mind reader, but it's almost like you got into their head and
she gets me.
You quelled their nerves before they even had a chance to verbalize them.
Yes. And every strength has a weakness. So that's kind of a weakness, running too many scenarios, right? Or getting gloom and doomy. But the corresponding strength, think about Sarah Blakely invented Spanx, right?
Yeah.
The corresponding strength to these people in our lives. Look, see, I'm back here. I live in this space. I live here. Evaluating. I'm always evaluating. It makes sense if I'm a body language expert to evaluate. But the corresponding strength to people who run scenarios and can sometimes pop our bubbles when we're excited about something. They set goals, they measure progress, and they update plans. So Sarah Blakely, everybody thinks she just tried on nylons one time. She wanted to hold everything in and she cut the legs off the nylons. No, years earlier, she believes in manifesting and she wrote in a journal, allow me to create universe, have me create a product that changes people's lives, that helps people's lives. Did that years earlier. So then when she cut the nylons off one time under her pants or everything was tight, she's like, oh my gosh, this is it. But she had already this Dan that I was dating, he's writing a fabulous book. It's called Teach and Grow Rich, but it's not about being a teacher. It's about reciprocity. It's like giving to others to then have wins in life, right? It's like sharing and giving. And one of the things he talks about in his book, which I love, is called a pre-decision compass. A pre-decision compass is I've already made a pre-decision. If this happens or this happens, here's what I do next. So for instance, personally, if someone breaks up with you or your heart is broken, you might have a pre-decision. When that happens, I don't turn to food. I walk. I make sure every day I get up, I get fresh air, and I walk. That's a pre-decision. And Dan calls them pre-decision compass, like in different areas of our lives. So in a meeting, if you start to tell if someone is being deceptive or you believe someone's being deceptive, what's your pre-decision compass? What have you already decided in these moments? Do you keep pitching the person? One of my clients is a guy named Billy Zeeby, millionaire. He was part owner of a company called Hollywood Videos.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Back in the day, they competed, kind of like the blue collar version of Blockbuster.
Yep.
And Billy Zeeby's really, really smart and strategic. And he encouraged the other owners to sell Hollywood Videos. And guess what? They sold it for something like 2.8 billion with a B. And 2 years later, Netflix took over the whole entire market.
Right.
So not only was Hollywood Videos closed, Blockbuster was closed, and all those Blockbusters turned into Anytime Fitness gyms all over and all these shopping plazas all over the place. So this understanding how to get this pre-decision compass, how to get that together. So Billy Zeeby had a pre-decision regarding, he was flying in from Vegas, I think to Florida, or maybe even Chicago, somewhere East Coast more. And he suspected this client wanted Billy's company to give him ideas. But this client, potential client, had been working with another company similar to Billy Zeeby's for years. And Billy's like, I kind of feel like they're idea shopping or price shopping, and that they just want us to get our ideas or get our prices to then go back and to have some leverage with the company they've already been working with for a couple decades. So if that's the case, we'll be walking out. So Billy and his team, he flies out 6 people from Vegas over here, more to the East Coast. They get in the meeting. They've got a fancy PowerPoint, this Mac Daddy presentation with all these ideas they can do for this company. And Billy asked the guy right out of the gate, had we all been there, we would have heard him and seen the man he's talking to. Billy said, let me ask you, you've been working with this other company for 28 years. What's making you look to move in a different direction now? And the body language of the person running the meeting showed uncertainty, had the lips disappear. When we don't like what we see or hear, our lips disappear. It's called lip roll equals emotional control. That's the one I said in the beginning of the interview when my dad says, not a problem. And the lips disappear. It's like, move it out, get the kids in the minivan or the truck, right? So the guy's lips disappeared. He did a shoulder shrug, which is uncertainty. When he said, oh, well, we're not really happy with blank. Well, why the uncertainty then? And Billy, based on the training he had received from me on body language and detecting deception, he said, oh, no, they're price shopping and idea shopping. So guess what? They closed the computer. He said, well, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. I don't think we're going to be a fit for what you're looking for. And I wish you good luck. I hope you find what you're looking for. Close the computer after all this, 2-3 weeks creating this Mac Daddy presentation, coming up with these amazing ideas of how they could best serve this company, flying those people in from Vegas. Those flights aren't inexpensive, minimum of $800, putting up in hotels. They walk out. His whole team is like, what are you doing? And he goes, you'll see. See, Billy Zeeby got 2 steps ahead of human behavior. Guess what happens? A month later, it's announced that company decided to stay with the company they were with all along. They never switched, but they had meetings after meetings after meetings with other companies that came and shared their ideas and their content, their intellectual property. Billy was able to get 2 steps ahead. So just like if you're talking to Sarah Blakely or Jesse Itzler, and you see them move forward and back a lot, these people are thinking about what happens 5 years from now, 10 years from now. They're thinking about the future, leaning into the future, bringing it to now, leaning to the past to bring it now. Understanding simple behaviors can help you make smarter decisions right now in the moment. Because you're 2 steps ahead and they don't know it.
Yeah.
They don't know that you're 2 steps ahead because you've been trained over here with Jason and Janine.
Well, you actually say that. I'm going to have to go back and watch the tape because a few years ago, I got to be a part of a production with Sarah Blakely, who is lovely. She's just the nicest. She was on an episode of a PBS show that we used to produce called To Dine For. And I now want to go back to the tape and watch and just see how much she does that because I never would have guessed it. But this is something that I was really excited to ask you about because it's something that I talk my team's ears off about. And that is this concept of, I believe everybody has a different way of hiding. So there've been many times in my life or in my career rather, where I was given a preconceived notion of what somebody was going to be like on camera. We want you to interview them. He doesn't interview very well when a woman's talking to him, or he doesn't know how to take anything seriously. So just kind of get in, get out. And I remember one specifically, I was sitting down with somebody who had been through some really difficult things in their life. He had been in the military. He had suffered violence at some point in his life. And everything that I was told was, he doesn't really take things seriously. I don't think he's going to give you an emotional interview. And so all these things were just being thrown at me to make up my mind before I even sat down in the chair. So as the conversation started, I started to see what they were talking about. Anytime I would shift my conversation to something that was a little more serious or a situation where perhaps he came off being a very strong and tough individual, he would tell a joke. He would deflect. So I would say, what was this like? And he would make a joke. I would say, how difficult was that for you? And he would make a joke. And I realized that he is not somebody who can't take it seriously, but instead he's somebody who's hiding from me. And the best way that he knows how to hide, the mask that he wears, is humor. And it all clicked for me that the next best move I had to make was to stop laughing, not feed into the joke structure of this conversation, but instead let it get uncomfortable for a little bit and say, I'm not going to let you get out of this one. I really want to learn more about this. And next thing you know, he's opening up. He's got tears in his eyes. He's sharing this story with me. And I've started to apply this now, this idea across all conversations I've had in the past and think, is there ever really a situation where I sat down and someone's not a good conversationalist or not a good storyteller? Or did I maybe just not do a good job in finding out how they were hiding or not creating an environment where they felt safe? So I'm just curious your thoughts on that and this ability for people to hide even when they don't know that they're trying to hide.
Well, I love that you shared that story with me, Jason. There's a comedian named Joe Matarese, and I used to do stand up in my 20s when I lived in New York City. And Joe Matarese, his joke is he came home and his girlfriend found another woman's phone number in his pants pocket and said, "Who's Michelle? And why does it say XO? Call me. Who's Michelle?" And Joe said, "What? I love you." What? I love you. That when people are feeling uncomfortable, one of the ways to hide is to use humor. And for sure, I'm in that space. And also humor helps me if I'm really mad or disappointed about something or heartbroken. Levity works so well for me. Like, I'm not one of those people that needs to have like this really deep conversation, like levity is so easy. Like for me, like even Dan and I, this ending of our relationship, quite frankly, if I came out and on my front, I love McDonald's unsweet iced tea. If I came out and on McDonald's and on my front porch in a heart was like 6 McDonald's unsweet iced teas lined up, shaped like a heart, I would be talking to Dan right now saying, let's figure this out, man. Like there's something that happens for me when someone jokes or uses levity. And I think it goes back to what you're saying about building rapport. Like if you know this about Sarah Blakely, it's like, oh, this person gets me. Like if Dan thinks with his head, he's an ENTJ. So we're different. He lives with his head. I live with my heart. He said things like, when you're traveling, we get really disconnected. We need to figure out a way to stay more connected. And I said, Dan, the way I say that is I miss you. I miss you.
Yeah.
We're just like so different. But if I came out and there was like McDonald's iced tea, 6 of them in a heart, $1 each, like the fix is a $8.58 solution for Janine Driver. I think everybody's different on that. Someone else would be like, what the F is, this bullshit,
Yeah.
So to answer your question with comedy and levity, when people feel uncomfortable, they'll joke. When they get busted in a lie, there'll be a lot of humor that sometimes happens with people. I think what you did there by being quiet is really great. In my world, I call that WAIT. It stands for why am I talking? So you ask the question and you stop talking. I had a guy, fuel was being stolen at a company in Salt Lake City, Utah. Outside of Salt Lake City, and 8 giant tankers that you see full of gas driving down the highway. 8 of those are being stolen every month. The quantity of gas that's in that every single month. And this company is really quite extraordinary. They donate free gas to anyone who's going through cancer because their CEO had cancer.
Oh, wow.
And so anyone, if you were going through chemo or radiation, you could go to any of their gas stations and get free gas for your car. And that program that they had offered to their community, they were going to have to stop the program because 8 giant tankers of fuel is being stolen every month by an internal person, by one of the people in their company. So they brought me in. And I brought a team. So I think I had, 8 or 9 of us there. This is a while ago. So like 8 or 9 of us are there. And it's this one guy, I suspect all of a sudden he gets real funny. So his baseline, so to read people, you first have to get their baseline. What's their normal behavior? Like talking about something like, oh, tell me about your kids. How many kids do you have? Oh, tell me about how did you meet your wife? Tell me about how'd you get this job? What's your favorite, whatever. And then when I started getting into the gas being stolen, he became Mr. Funny Man. He changed his baseline. And when I would ask a question, instead of taking the bait and laughing like you at this interview, stopping, I did the same thing. And I just stopped, just looked at him, wait, WAIT, why am I talking? And I just sat there and guess what happened? Mike, same thing. You talked earlier about when you're interviewing people through all this suffering and pain. If someone's sitting opposite you, they've gone through some serious shit, right? And they forget, if you're able to build such great rapport and be authentic, they forget that there's a microphone or a camera. So for me, I have the cameras in the room, 2 of them. One's on their knee, one is standing up. There's a boom mic over me and this guy talking right here. It's like 6 inches over her head, a boom mic. And this guy, when he starts cracking the jokes, and I ask the question and I just listen and I just sit there. And it's a good 25 seconds. And by the way, you've done this, Jason. So it can be a little torturous, right? Because you're sitting there. And it's like, it's maybe 20, 25 seconds, but it feels like it's 5.5 minutes. It's like that fence when I almost got kidnapped. It seemed to me like 20 feet high, but really it was probably like, 7 foot high, whatever the traditional size of a fence is. So sorry, I keep playing with my hair. I'm getting hot in here. So I'm going to just move us to get my fan going now.
Yeah, no problem.
So what happens is if you can be quiet, you can get people to be authentic because people are uncomfortable with silence when they're holding something back. If you asked me if I ever cheated on my ex-husband, which I did not, if you said, Janine, did you ever cheat on your ex-husband? I said, no. And you go, really? And I go, no. And you listen and you just sit there and you go, I'm going to be like this. I'm going to say, I don't know what else to tell you, man. Like, I'm going to be okay. Truthful people who are being forthright and authentic, they're going to be okay with some silence.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, I don't know what's happened with this dude, but I'm good. And so when someone's holding back either deception or they're holding back some intense emotions, quiet is really a powerful tool. Another tool, two more tools here is, and now this is more combative. This is what, like if someone was lying to you, like your kids or an employee or something, is why should I believe you? And you don't say it attitude-y. Like, why should I believe you? You know, it's not attitude-y. It's like, well, you know, did you ever use the corporate card for personal use? No, absolutely never. No, never. I would have to be a fool to use my corporate card for personal use. I'd be stupid to do something like that. Really? Yeah, really. I mean, I swear to God, ask anybody. They'll tell me. Right? So we can either A, be quiet. B, at this point, I can say, why should I believe you, Jason? Why should I believe you?
Yeah.
There's a movie. I don't know if you saw this movie. And the other one is Repeat the Question. It's Sandra Bullock. And oh my gosh, what's that guy's name? He's the accent. She's a hotshot lawyer, but she works for like human beings. And Hugh Grant. And Sandra Bullock. And she ends up being like his lawyer, and she doesn't like him. She tries to shut down all his work. She ends up being his lawyer. She eventually quits. He's like this big corporate titan shutting down schools and all this stuff, the community center. And I forget the name of that movie. And so she quits the job eventually. She's like, I'm done. I can't work for you anymore. I'm done.
2 weeks notice.
2 weeks notice. That's it. Thanks
for me. Yep.
That's it. 2 weeks notice. And watch that movie. Go towards the end, fast forward to the end, and go to where she does quit. And she goes and interviews at all these other companies. And when she goes to interviews at all these, I should put this in my classes. When she goes to interview at all these different companies, Hugh Grant's character had called ahead and said, don't hire her. I don't want to lose her. Don't hire her. If you interview her, don't hire her, or we're going to stop doing business with you. So their hands are tied, right? And so she gets in there and she says to one of the guys, because she's not getting hired by anyone, and she's like, did he call you? Did he call you? And she's like, and the guy, it's a man, and the man goes, no. And she says, did he call you? And he's like, yes, he called me, and he said he wanted to do business with me. You know, and sometimes it's asking the question, you know, get the story behind the story. It's like asking that question again. And this happened to me one time. And so I've experienced the impact of someone repeating the same question that can peel back the layers. So I did this event. I got a standing ovation at the end, and I'm on the hug program. So people come up and they're hugging me. And this one woman, I hugged maybe, 9 people. And this woman came up to me. I'll never forget it. And she hugged me and she said, hey, Janine, what do you do to take care of Janine? And I go, I get massages, and, you know, I go to the mall. I like getting massages at the mall. They're really, really good. And I went to massage school in my 20s, so I know where the good ones are, you know, and there's this one woman, she's really good. And, you know, I go for walks, and she looks at me. I gave that answer, and she goes, no. What do you do to take care of Janine? And I looked at her. And she said nothing. She just repeated that question, and I burst out crying. I just burst out crying because I felt like the answer I was giving her, she saw right through it. She saw, yes, I may do those things, but what am I really doing? How is Janine hugging Janine? Like, how am I really taking care of me? It's not getting massages, or going for walks. Like, where am I investing in Janine? You know, where am I pouring into me? And I'll never forget it. I can tell you, if I was in that conference room and the stage was like right here, I was right over here to the left on the ground at this point talking. She had hugged me. And I just remember her holding space. And I think that's what you do, Jason, for people when you sit there, is like being present. There's a great TED Talk that will change all of our lives. It's changed mine for sure. It's by a woman named Celeste Headlee. And Celeste Headlee had a show on NPR. And she's liberal, but she interviews people on both sides of the aisle. And the reason she's so good as a host is because she sits there and waits for the remarkable. Her father, I guess, was a famous musician. And when she was a kid, every time visitors would come and they would leave, her mother would say, "Oh, do you know who that is, Celeste? That was the famous ballerina from Europe. Blah, blah, blah. Celeste, do you know who that was? That was Benjamin Zander, the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic. Hey, Celeste, do you know who that was?" And she said every time a guest would leave, her mother would say, "This is how great that person is." And that she was raised with the belief that everyone has something remarkable about them. And so as a host of an NPR show, she says she sits there present, waiting for the remarkable. Like, where's the remarkable? She doesn't tune out. And I think that's what I'm hearing from you, like you being able to hold that space and sit there. And this helps me a lot. Like, because when I'm with someone who I feel is inauthentic, I will do that. And I say to myself, wow, what's really happening with this person? Mm-hmm. Like this person, and are they aware of it? In many situations, I don't think that they are aware that they're being inauthentic. Hi, I'm so happy to meet you. I've heard great things about you. I'm like, really? Do you talk to your kids that way? Like, no, like that's fake, fakeity, fake.
But I feel too that silence is so powerful in so many ways because I think it gives them a chance to ask themselves questions. So when somebody gives you an answer you're right, that 20 to 25 seconds is an absolute eternity. We were talking about 5 seconds before. 20 to 25, you really need some strength to power through that. But letting somebody sit in that moment, in some ways, it's like a negotiation. Like you're not going to get away that easy. But in other ways, I think it does give people a chance to not be on. You don't have to deliver right now. I'm just going to let you sit in there. And they start having a conversation with themselves, it seems. And they start thinking, oh, am I not giving enough? Or does he know that I'm not telling him everything? Or they start asking themselves questions. And like you're saying, next thing you know, they provide that little more. They provide that remarkable. It's amazing the power that silence can have, and to be trained in doing that. And it took years for me to get truly comfortable in silence because it is a tug of war, but it really is amazing the impact it can have on a conversation.
Oh, I wish I had it with me. It's in my car. I went for a hike, not yesterday, 2 nights ago, and I brought a book, and I think the name of it is Silence, but it's all about, or quiet or something. And I'll have to find it and I'll send it to you. But I read 2 chapters of it. I walk at this area called Huntley Meadows Park. It's really, really cool. And I climb. They have like a tower you can climb. And then I sit up there and I have conversations with God. I call it 2 Chairs. There's a great book called 2 Chairs by Bob Bodine. It's like you set up a chair and have a conversation with God. So I brought this book. One of the things I've decided I want to work on more is in these moments, because I want to run a podcast, but a podcast, you have to be a better listener than a sharer, right? Like you have to be so focused on listening. And I can tell you're so good because sometimes I'm talking so much in a podcast, the person's not really paying attention and they'll ask me a random question. It's like, they don't even know what I just said,
Right,
It's like, they're not listening. And it's my goal to work at being a better listener when other people are sharing. I'm not the best at that. And so this book was very interesting, and it's talking about famous people who their superpower ended up being good listeners. Was their superpower.
Listening is a skill like no other to me. And I would actually argue with you. I actually think you are a good listener because I can tell when I talk to you that you're not waiting for the next thing to say and you're building off of what I say. I think you're a better listener than you think. I think it's you telling yourself the whole too much Janine. I don't think it's true. I will also say, I don't think I could get too much Janine. So I just want to throw that out there now while I can. But I think this skill of listening, where I remember early in my career, I worked at Oprah for 11 years. So I've been interviewing people on camera for nearly 20 years now. And I remember, I tell this story probably too often, but I remember people giving me those tips and tricks when I was young. And this is how you get a great interview out of somebody on camera. And you turn your head to the side, which I do. You nod a lot, which I also do. You throw in the occasional, To make sure they think you're listening. And then you repeat a little bit of the last few things they said so that they know you were listening. So it's basically this blueprint of how to convince somebody or trick somebody into believing that I'm listening to what they just said. But I just realized very quickly that the easier solution to that would be to just listen. And then your body just, if you're actually listening and curious, I find that I actually do those things that they said, but there's authenticity behind it. So that was always my shortcut to all of this is instead of worrying about getting in and out in an hour, I go into it knowing we're going to sit here for as long as it takes for the two of us to have the conversation. And now I'm just going to release myself to listening. And then it just happens, right? You don't have to trick somebody into believing you're listening because when you're actually listening, they know. Yes.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so cool. That's right. You're in Chicago. She did her show over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool. It's so true. It's something for me. I consciously, I make myself aware of, like, I literally say, so I did a class one time in California. A friend of mine, she used to be a producer over at Extra with Mario Lopez and stuff, right? Her name's Tammy Leader Fuller, and she now runs a camp for women called Camp Empowerment. It's just women like me that we just want to invest in each other, right? And you're not allowed to say what you do, by the way, for the first 2 or 3 days, because it's not we are what we do, right? So it's so funny. At the end of 3 days, she's like, okay, you can now tell people what you do. And one person's like, well, I'm a brain surgeon and I graduated from Harvard. And the roommates are like, but you don't even brush your teeth. Like, what do you mean you're a brain surgeon from Harvard? I haven't seen you brush your teeth in 3 days since you got here. Like, this is crazy, right? So this whole world of this television thing. So what happened was Tammy would reach out to me all the time. And I remember thinking, I need to consciously become a good listener. I need to consciously become a good listener. And when I am able to do that, magic happens. And here's what happened. This Tammy Leader Fuller, I went to visit her. She was in California, and California has really cool stuff out there. You know, if you think this is kind of woo-woo, go to California. And we were there, and she hired this guy, and we had a private class, the two of us, where he put on different music, and we were in a dance studio, and the lights were out, kind of. And Tammy and I had to close our eyes, and we each had to dance to this different types of music, and with our eyes closed. So I don't know how Tammy's dancing. She doesn't know how I'm dancing, but he's analyzing who we are as human beings based on how we dance. However I was dancing, whatever like thing I was doing, versus Tammy was like water. So like, I guess Tammy was like really like, you know, sexual with her dancing. And I was like, pump up the jam, pump it, you know, like, and he said something that really helped me become a better person. And I remind myself of this, I would say at least 2 to 4 times a month, which is, he said, I'm so connected to fire and air, and fire and air makes the fire go bigger, right? It doesn't put it out. He said, when I walk into a room, I have so much energy that I turn the temperature of the thermostat up to 120. And he said, so I want you to think about, if you walk into a room and you turn the temperature up to 120, it can make some people feel uncomfortable. How can you, Janine, keep the thermostat on the outside at, 72 and keep that other third, that fire still burning inside me? It can still exist, but control, like if you ever go outside at night and they have those lamps that you can turn on, those lights that are propane and they heat it up at a restaurant, or I have one in my backyard, you can control it, right? You see the flame getting hotter. It could still be bigger, right? It's in there. Can I watch the temperature when I walk into the room? Like, I can make it warmer once they get to know me, but if I'm coming in at 120 degrees, a lot of people are going to be like, oh yeah, it's nice to meet you. So when I walk into a space now, I'm still me and I'm still 120 in there. But I walk in, or not, but, and I now walk in with, I'm going to come in at 72. I'm going to come in, which means I'm not going to come in and do all the talking. I'm going to come in and listen. And sometimes I get it wrong more than I get it right. It depends on, like right now I'm suffering because cancel. I'm not suffering. Right now I'm going to, my call to action on my hero's journey has recently begun. And it's uncomfortable as I begin the hero's journey, and I know great things will happen. When this happens to me, and maybe you at home and maybe you, Jason, when I'm getting vulnerable, I will often overcompensate. I'll come in hot, and it doesn't serve me well. I remember when I was speaking at the International IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and I'm in the back of the room. There's maybe 2,000 people in the room. It's packed. The woman on stage is the reporter that broke the story of Jeffrey Dahmer. They even did a Jeffrey Dahmer movie about it, and you see this person, this character in there. And so she was close with the police. She breaks the story. She finds out. They funnel all the information to her. And so she's talking, and it's all these chiefs of police from around the world. And I'm in the back, and I'm like the show monkey coming in to do body language, you know, and with my high energy. And she's just talking about some really serious stuff with Jeffrey Dahmer, right? Like all the different things that happen. In this room, you could hear a pin drop. People were mesmerized. My phone is now lighting up in the back of the room. I'm going to be introduced in about 10 minutes. I'm right after her. It's a hard turn from her to me. There's no break. And my phone lights up. It's my mother. Then it's my father. Then it's my sister, Carrie. And it's my other sister, Kayleen. I'm the oldest of three. And then it's Kayleen again. Then it's my mom again. And I'm like, what? My phone is lighting up like, you know, a Christmas tree. And I step out in the hall and I take it. And it's my mother, who never swore a day in her life, you know, twice. And I go, Mom, what's going on? And she told me she had breast cancer. And she said, Janine, I'm fucked. And to hear that by my 5'2" mother, who works for elderly homeless people, who never swore, a month later, a year later, my mother said, it was sometime between the beginning and the, she said, if this cancer kills me, Janine, I'm coming back as a swearing person, like you and your father. I go, Mom, you can swear now. Like, you're fighting cancer, you know. Like, she's like, it's just not who I am. It's just not who I am. But when she said she was fucked, because her mother died of bone cancer, her father died of lung cancer, her brother died of lung cancer, for her to have cancer. And I just remember having that call to adventure and really having a hard time with it. And I have to now go up. And I was overly funny. And I was inauthentic. And when I would tell the story about, I don't know, being on the Today Show or meeting, you know, you said the naughty bits earlier, you know, we have 3 power zones, our neck dimple, our belly button, and I used to say groin. I now say naughty bits, and I talk about it, and you say more than you think. The reason I say naughty bits is because Ted from Queer Eye from the Straight Guy was in the green room at the Today Show one time. And he goes, what are you going to talk to Al Roker about? I go, being confident. We keep our 3 power zones open, our neck dimple, our belly button, and our groin. And he said, please don't say in a morning show to Al Roker the word groin. It's so crass. And just call it the naughty bits. It's from the Holy Grail. And I thought it was so funny. And I'm like, yeah. Of course, I went on stage and on TV and I said groin, because you have to practice like you play. You know, it wasn't in there yet, my long-term memory back here in the brainstem. Now, of course, I call it naughty bits all the time. But here's what happened. I shared that story. I shared another story, like how you talked about Oprah. It's not you bragging, like it's a piece of who you are, and it's learning how you could be a better interviewer and how you could be a better listener. And it's not that you think you're a good person because you worked on the Oprah Winfrey show. But you could deliver that same message in an inauthentic way that we could perceive it as ego-driven.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me that day, is the stories I share organically and authentically all the time. That day, I evidently oversold them. When I did stand-up comedy, my comedy coach, Tim Davis, said, it's selling versus sharing. Great comedians share. Not great comedians will sell. And you can feel if someone is trying to sell you something or if someone is trying to share something with you. And so I hit the stage and I was selling that I'm valuable. Looking back on that day, Jason and you at home, if I could have done it differently, what I would have done is I would have authentically shared that I just heard the worst news I'd ever heard in my entire life. And I would have said, hey, I'm in the back of the room. I'm watching one of the best speakers I've ever seen. Round of applause. She was so amazing. And my phone is lighting up and it's my sister Kayleen and my sister Carrie and my dad and my mother. And I pick up the phone and my mother just told me 4 minutes before I was introduced that she has breast cancer. And everyone in her family, other than her sister, her parents, her brother, all died of cancer. I'm going to do my best today to share these techniques with you that I know can help you in law enforcement. They can save your life. And I want to let you know I'm suffering a little bit inside, and I'm going to do my best. I think I could have told those same stories in a way that wouldn't have been seen as selling. It wouldn't have been seen as like inauthentic. It would have been just seen as me being real, like just being a human being. And I think sometimes when I'm not being a great listener, like potentially at the beginning of our call, I don't know if I was a good listener or not, but it's usually because I'm coming in from a place of recently being called on a call for adventure. I'm recently started a hero's journey, and it's like getting your legs underneath you, you know? It's like, I'll get there, you know? I think that's, the reason I share this story with everybody, I do this for a living. You know, Jason did this for a living, does it for a living now, and these podcasts. And we get it wrong. I know I do. I'm sure you do more times than we get it right. It's like when you're not the best version of you or you were inauthentic, like give yourself a break. My question is, what's the story behind the story? What was happening earlier for you that day or the day before, you know? And if you are in a ton of shit right now, you know, how can you still show up and be authentic? And I know it's scary sometimes to be vulnerable and share what is happening inside of us. But today, it's a different world than the 80s. You know, it used to be seen as emotions as a sign of weakness, especially in the business world. That's dying. If you are in a company that is seen as a sign of weakness, give it 5 more years. Because they'll lose all their employees. Because today we are attracted to, you know, I think when COVID hit and when we now are working in people's living rooms and you're hearing someone's fan above their head or you're hearing someone's 3-year-old Labrador Jojo barking, or one of my kids opened the door at one point and I was like, get out, get out. You hear kind of a door open. Once we are in someone's living room during COVID while we're working, you can't go back to the workforce the way it was. Because now you know them as human beings. And today, I think we're pulled towards people being just real and in the moment. And you're going to get it wrong. And when you do, I call them resets and say, hey, listen, in the call yesterday, I really felt like I was selling the importance of blank. And I just want to give you a little backstory. I was having a really tough day. I heard some bad news. And I'd love to do a reset on that call. Could we do another call about how I can help you as a keynote speaker for your event? And I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, people say, yeah, I'd love to give you another shot. You know, because they don't know. We're not mind readers.
Well, and isn't it so refreshing? We're sold to so often. I recently just had to buy a car, and it was one of the most awful experiences because you're just constantly being sold to. We get calls all the time. There's constantly people selling. To me, it is such a step in the right direction when somebody is real. I am almost inclined to, when somebody is being very real and you can see it, be like, whatever it is, I'll buy it. I know you're not even selling me.
Yeah.
I just, so it's interesting to me, you know, for people that communicate for a living, like yourself, like me, to realize that you do sometimes get it wrong. And that sometimes we do. I can count on a million different times that I had done things that just wasn't the right way or the way I wanted to have done them. And you don't always get that get out of jail free card. But no. I think what we are seeing, like you said, you had said earlier in the podcast, the things that you learn, you can't unlearn. And that's kind of what COVID taught us, is that now you're forced to see the person behind the facade. You're forced to realize that these are more than just cogs in a wheel. It was an opportunity for us to take ourselves out of our own narrow point of view and realize that everybody, because it's so easy to get self-centered and think all of this is happening to me. But right now in this moment, this is all you are as a person, is this personal interaction. So that's what I love about this so much. And what I love about what I do so much is I have this opportunity to sit down with somebody like you. And yes, we could go through all the points of your book and everything from, you know, your neck dimple to your belly button and your naughty bits. But this conversation is a real conversation that I've taken so much more out of, because we had a chance to get to know each other a little bit. And that is my goal through all of this, is hopefully to find new ways, not to get better answers out of people, but to find new ways to get to see the real person behind who I'm talking to, and hopefully spread that word and just give a little bit more of that into life. Is how do we get to know each other on a level that is so much deeper than the superficial?
I think the name is in the title, the Curiosity Blueprint. Like if we really showed up with curiosity, How might our day be different? You know, in my not my TED Talk, when I do a keynote speech, sometimes I show a picture, and the picture has 20 different pennies, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and there's 20 different pennies. And I ask the audience, write down which letter is the correct penny without looking in your pocket at a penny. And invariably, almost no one can guess the real penny. And I said, isn't that interesting? You know, I'm 54. So, you know, some of us are 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and we've seen pennies since we were 2. But out of 15 pennies, we can't tell which is the real penny. And I said, here's my call to action. I said, listen, the reason we don't know which is the real penny is because we only need to know 3 things to use the penny. We need to know the size of the penny. We need to know the color of the penny. We need to know the value of the penny. If I know those 3 things, it's enough for me to use the penny. But there's so many other details on the penny. Is this what we're doing in life? Are we learning just enough to be able to work with this person I work with? Are we learning just enough to date this new person I'm dating, or to hire this person to watch my kids? Do I know just enough to know that they can watch kids? They can be fun. Whoever it is it possible that we can today, this week, next month, learn 3 more fun facts about the penny? 3 more details about the pennies in our life, the things that are around us all the time that we only know enough to operate in the relationship where we're at. And it's a game changer for people. They're like, oh my gosh. And I say, well, that is the second version of Amazing Grace. The second version of Amazing Grace is slowing down and learning the story behind the story. When you know the story behind the story, you can understand the impact and how it changes people's lives. And, you know, I think about that quite a bit. Like, what is the story behind the story? My father and I, we're hotheads, and I'm a recovering hothead. And I was doing my camper. I love camping. I was doing my camper over in Maine. I don't have it now. I sold the camper during COVID, but I don't like the campers in the inside. Most of them are like dark brown. So I like a country feel, you know. I have like shiplap behind me here in my bedroom. Modern country. And so I had my contractor. I took him up from Virginia to Maine, and he was redoing it, painting the walls white and putting in flooring. And I had linoleum flooring, this like high-end linoleum stuff. It looks like wood, but it's really a picture of wood, but it's good for bathrooms, basements, campers, because water can't get underneath it. And if it does, it's just a picture, like laminated of wood. So unlike some of the other woods, if it gets wet, it'll buckle up. So my father sees that in the tent outside. My father goes, hey, Janine, tell me you're not using that crap in the tent for the flooring in the camper. I go, I am using it, Dad. It's waterproof, blah, blah, blah. My father goes, yeah, let me tell you a story, Janine. That's peel and stick. You peel it and you stick it down. Your mother had me do that years ago in the basement, and when winter came, it all popped up. You're wasting your time, your money. Do something right. Do it right the first time. For the love of God, Janine. Did not teach you anything, right? So it's my dad getting feisty. He invites my contractor and his daughter and son who are there, myself and my 3 sons, over for dinner. We're staying at his house because the camper's being renovated. My contractor's at a hotel up the street. We go to dinner. My dad's girlfriend makes this fabulous dinner. At the end of dinner, my father goes, Raimundo, tell me Janine returned that crappy floor. He goes, Mr. Driver, I don't want to get involved. I go, Dad, I'm using the floor. It's waterproof. Mom died 9 years ago. And that was, back in the 80s when you did that peel and stick square tile that you can now buy from the Dollar Tree store. That's not what this is. And my father goes, this is your problem, Janine. You always have your head up your fucking ass. This is your problem. I'm swearing. I get my kids out. They've never seen this version of my dad. I'm like, clearly, I don't even want to get a hotel in New Hampshire. In Maine, because I'm afraid my dad's going to be going to every hotel screaming and yelling. So we go to New Hampshire, hour and a half away. I'm like, we're going to stay in a hotel in New Hampshire. Like, I cannot, and my father's calling me every day, right? Like, he called me immediately call me, answer me. Don't walk away from me. Your mother wouldn't be happy you walked away from me, right? He's like trying to bully me, whatever. And I want to say to my father, Dad, I'm the daughter that when Mom died, lived with you for the next 2 weeks. I'm the daughter that wrote the handwritten thank you notes. After we buried Mom that day, I stayed up all night to write those handwritten thank you notes to anyone that sent flowers to you from the fire department. My dad's a mechanic of the fire department. I'm the daughter that when Mom was diagnosed and given 3 months to live, I'm the daughter that stopped having an au pair and had a friend help me watch my kids so I could help mom pay for the special treatment with Dr. Mitch Gaynor in New York City and get you to get trains up to New York City from Boston. Like, I'm the daughter that dropped everything to help you and to help mom. I'm that daughter, right? But I didn't do it because so how dare you talk to me like this, right? This verbal abuse. I didn't do it because I have a motto. Do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? I could have done that and been right, but I really want to be effective. So here's my system. If I don't trust how I'm going to respond, I disappear. It's self-preservation, and I usually will articulate it, but I couldn't this time. So I'm not taking my dad's calls. I go to a non-denominational Christian church. It's in a movie theater. I took my dad once. He calls me a week later. Hey, clearly your movie theater church isn't working because I've been calling you nonstop for 10 days. Call me, Janine. God wants to hear from you too, right? Attacking my movie theater church. And I'll never forget, it was like 2.5 weeks. And I finally called my dad because you know what I realized? The anniversary of my mother's death is August 7th. It's September 7th. And this was the end of August. So when I bought that flooring, it was a trigger for my dad really missing my mom. It had nothing to do with the flooring. I teach in my classes, anger is a secondary emotion to fear, anxiety, and sadness. So dad's not angry about the floor. He's just sad. It triggered. He missed my mom. They were high school sweethearts. They met at 15. My dad and I were in the room when my mom passed. Like, they were best friends. So when I called dad, finally, I said, hey, dad, he didn't answer. And I said, Dad, it's Janine. I love you. You're important to me. I say when people feel they matter and belong, cooperation is strong. So I'm like, Dad, I love you. You're important to me. I am so sorry I walked away from you. I'm so sorry I disappeared and couldn't take your call. I didn't trust me on how I was going to respond to what you had to say. I'm now in a place where I can trust my response, and I would love to hear what you have to say. Please call me because I love you and I miss you. My phone rings 5 minutes later, Jason, and you at home, and it's my dad, and he's crying. He goes, I'm just really missing your mom, Janine, and I'm sorry I shouldn't have taken it out on you. I'm really just missing her, and I'm sorry. And by the way, I went by the camper. Raimundo did a great job. The flooring looks unbelievable. And I think, that could have ended up very differently. I could have had a father that I haven't been talking to for the last several years. And I think that when we have the need to be right, and I would have been right to call my dad out on that verbal abuse and to set boundaries. When we set boundaries, are we doing it at a time where the person's able to receive it? It wouldn't have been then, right? So a couple months went by after this, and my sisters and I called dad on FaceTime. We said, we want to talk about when you're suffering, how can we help support you so you can have healthy responses by asking for our help? Because we love you and we don't ever want to be spoken to the way you've spoken to us in the past again. So can we create a system together as a family? And he goes, yeah. So it's not to not have the conversation. It's to have the conversation at the right time. And when we set boundaries, I think what the biggest mistake we make is we don't say what the consequence is. And if you do yell at us, Dad, we're letting you know, we're going to say, I'm now hanging up. I love you and I'm hanging up. Like, that will be the consequence. And then you follow through on that consequence. And so for me, as we, wind down here, I think I'm constantly a work in progress. I'm constantly learning from other people's podcasts like The Curiosity Blueprint here, Mel Robbins. I'm learning, I'm an eternal student, and emotional intelligence grows with age. I'm not great at handling conflict because my trigger is to get angry. And so I create this system. I say 7 below, let it go, 8, 9, 10, be angry then. So when I get mad at something, when I use the tool, it's one thing to have it, it's another thing to use it. If I can stop and say, how angry am I right now about this? And I can say, it's a 2, it's a 4, 7 below, let it go, 8, 9, 10, be angry then. I'm not a Tony Robbins person. Like, I haven't taken all his stuff, but he calls that a pattern interrupt, I believe. So when I'm angry, if I can just stop and number my anger, that pattern interrupt will bring the blood back to my neocortex. To label things is here. When we're angry, it's down here in the mammalian part of the brain, like survival. But when we have to categorize and label something, blood goes back to the neocortex, higher thinking. So 7 below, let it go, 8, 9, 10, be angry. Or if you're anxious, be anxious then. Like Sarah Blakely, how likely Sarah, is it that a helicopter is going to kill our friend on the lake? It's a 2. If Sarah, there's a great guy out there, Dr. Dan Siegel, and he says, name it to tame it. When you can name it, you can control it. So name it to tame it. Dr. Dan Siegel. He talks a lot about understanding anger and fear, and another great person to follow and hit up on YouTube, because he'll blow your mind. Tons of free stuff on YouTube. Have you heard of him, Dr. Dan Siegel? I have heard
of Dan Siegel, yes. Yeah. There's so much out there. What you just said is such a funny reminder for me as well. Funny is the wrong word, but I typically respond to situations similarly. So I can be a hothead, but I am definitely somebody who will close off. And I just get very quiet and remove myself from situations or avoid calls. I know my brother I started this company with my brother. And so for years, what had happened was our conversations became all based around business. And we weren't having, he's my best friend in the world, but we stopped having those best friend conversations. And it got to the place where for a period of time, I was avoiding all his calls because I didn't want to talk business at that point. I didn't want to be stressed. I didn't want to talk finance or goals. And we got together one Christmas and he was like, you don't pick up the phone anymore. And I explained to him, I was like, I'm so sorry. And we had a couple drinks. And so I was just very honest with him. I was like, I just didn't want to have that conversation anymore. And he pointed out, he's like, you assumed that I was calling to talk about business now. And I wasn't. I was actually just calling because I missed you. And then all that time goes past. But that's how I deal with things a lot, is I close off in that same way. And whether it's out of anger or just dread, whatever it is, all of those things can change your perspective so much that I realize I've probably missed out on quite a bit in life because I've reacted in that way.
Well, imagine if instead of doing it that way, you created a boundary and said, we need a system in place where I'm not in a place to talk about business. What can we do on that? And I'm working on my boundary creating all the time. And it's a work in progress. One of the lines I like to say now is, if you're talking to me, Jason, and you're telling me something and I feel like I'm going to react, I can say, Jason, what you have to say to me right now is important for me to hear, and I'm not in a place to hear it. I don't trust how I'm going to respond. So can we please talk about this later today or tomorrow? But here's the responsibility. Whoever postpones the conversation is the responsible person for picking up that conversation and not letting it go. So, hey, listen, what you have to say to me is super important. And I want to hear what you have to say. And I'm not in a headspace to hear it, a heart space to hear it. I don't trust how I'm going to respond. And I want to hear, I want to give you my undivided attention. Can we talk about this tomorrow morning where I'm in a different headspace? Because it's really important.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think people want to feel heard and acknowledged. And creating boundaries, once you kind of get the system down, it's pretty easy. It's just, what is the consequence of the boundary? I was dating this guy a year ago named Antone, and his stepmother always talked about politics, super liberal, hates Trump, just wants to talk for hours and hours about how Trump is a jerk, like just hours and hours. And so she would invite us to dinner all the time. He never wanted to go. I love her. She's like big, fabulous personality. She's an artist. She's so cool. And I'm like, why aren't we going to dinner? Marjorie, she's so cool. I want to go. And he's like, Janine, I can't hear it. I can't sit for 3 hours listening about how much Trump is a jerk. Like, I can't do it. And I go, well, why can't we set a boundary and say, listen, we would love to come. However, if politics is brought up, we will leave immediately. And I just want to give you a heads up. We want to enjoy your company. We want to talk about anything else. We do not want to talk about Joe Biden. We do not want to talk about Donald Trump. No politics. I mean, I get that politics are important in your world. It's just uncomfortable for me. So if you want us to come over, we would love to come. No politics. If politics are brought up, we'll give you a nudge first to get out of it. But if it's brought up a second time, we're just going to excuse ourselves and leave. And it doesn't have to be a dramatic thing. I'm working on it.
My conversation with Janine was so enjoyable, we lost track of time and her phone died. So we didn't get a proper goodbye. But from here on out, when I think of the word authentic, I'm going to picture one person, Janine Driver. In what was one of the most real and honest conversations I've ever had, Janine taught me many things. The importance of resetting ourselves, the need for true authenticity in our relationships, and the value in the words we choose when speaking to others and ourselves. I hope our conversation provided value to even one of you out there listening. And if you've made it this far, I want to thank you for being curious. If you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe button to join us in our weekly conversations and become a part of our community.